They say life doesn't give second chances, but sometimes, in the least expected places like the back corner of a restaurant kitchen, a single moment can rewrite an entire future. Asterisk, the silver rain pattered gently against the windows of the Velvet Ember, an upscale restaurant tucked in a quiet corner of downtown Chicago. Inside, chandeliers cast golden halos onto mahogany tables, and the aroma of aged wine, seared steak, and fresh rosemary danced through the air like a whisper. It was the kind of place where city elites came not just to eat, but to be seen. Among the bustle of suited servers and pristine white tablecloths moved Lena Carter, 23 years old and nearly invisible, dressed in the standard black and white uniform. Her long brown hair was tucked neatly under a cap, and her tired eyes scanned each table with precision. She was in hour 11 of her double shift, balancing exhaustion and grace like it was second nature. To most guests, Lena was no one, a background extra in the performance of their lives. They didn't know she lived in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper. They didn't know she hadn't bought new shoes in over a year, or that her feet ached so badly each night that she often fell asleep with them wrapped in ice. They didn't know that every dollar she made was split between rent and her little brother's insulin medication. They didn't ask, and she didn't expect them to. Her world was small work, home, and worry. Dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. But that Thursday night would be different. That night, the course of Lena's life would shatter like glass across the hardwood floor. Behind the smile at exactly 6:45 p.m., Lena was clearing table 9 when her manager, Douglas Cray, barked from across the dining hall. "Table 3 VIP, move." She jumped. "Yes, chef." Table 3 was always reserved for important guests, business tycoons, movie producers, occasionally even the mayor. She grabbed a tray of drinks to wines, one scotch, one sparkling water, adjusted her stride. She didn't notice the busboy had just spilled a drop of sauce on the floor near the kitchen door. She didn't notice until it was too late. Her foot slid. Her balance gave. The tray flew. The sound of crystal goblets crashing against the floor silenced the restaurant like a thunderclap. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze in mid-air. The sound rang out, echoing between the velvet drapes and polished walls. Lena dropped to her knees immediately, heart pounding, face flushed with heat and humiliation. I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. Manager Cray stormed, over eyes blazing. "You clumsy little fool. Do you have any idea how expensive those glasses are? This isn't some greasy diner on the south side. This is the Velvet Ember." The guests stared, some in amusement, some in pity. No one said a word. "I swear," Cray growled. "We hire charity cases these days. Clean it up and get out of sight before you ruin someone's birthday." Lena's hands shook as she tried to collect the glass shards, one cutting into her palm. Her vision blurred not from the pain, but from shame. Then a voice cut through the silence, calm, low, commanding. "That's enough." Heads turned. Cray froze. From a nearby corner booth rose a tall man in a tailored charcoal gray suit. Nathaniel Grant, known to most as the billionaire CEO behind a string of luxury hotels and restaurants, including this one. His name carried weight. His presence, gravity. He slowly approached the scene. His gaze flicked from Cray to Lena, then to the cut on her hand. "You're embarrassing yourself," Nathaniel said coolly to Cray, "and this establishment." Cray opened his mouth, flustered. "Sir, we're only demeaning a human being in front of our guests." He turned to a waiter. "Bring the first aid kit now." Lena looked up, stunned. No one had ever stood up for her before, not like this. "Mr. Grant," she whispered, "I'll clean it up. I didn't mean to." "You don't need to apologize for being human." He knelt beside her, picking up a large shard of glass with surprising care. "Are you okay?" She nodded numbly, not trusting herself to speak. Later. In the staff kitchen while Cray was being pulled into a private meeting upstairs. Lena sat at the metal counter with a cold compress on her hand. Her heart still raced. What just happened? That's when he walked in. Nathaniel. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the old machine in the corner, just like any other person, and sat across from her. "I didn't mean to interrupt your evening, sir," she mumbled. "You didn't. That manager did." She stayed silent. "You work hard," he added after a pause. "I've seen you here 3 times this week, all double shifts. Bills don't pay themselves." He nodded slowly. "What's your name?" She blinked. No one had asked that. In weeks. Lena Carter. Well, Lena Carter, he said, sipping the lukewarm coffee, you deserve better than what I saw out there. She couldn't help it. She laughed bitterly. I'm just a waitress. That was my fault. I slipped. That's all. No, that's not all. The way people are treated in moments like that tells you everything about a place and a person. She looked down at her wrapped hand. Doesn't change anything. What if it could? He asked quietly. She looked up. He didn't smile. But there was something in his eyes, curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. Recognition. Nathaniel didn't say anything else that night. But when Lena checked her locker at closing, she found an envelope taped inside. Inside was a note. You have more potential than you see. Let me show you NG. And underneath it, a business card, not for a restaurant, for a leadership mentorship foundation Nathaniel had founded 2 years ago. A program for underprivileged youth and aspiring entrepreneurs, fully paid. Lena stared at it, stunned. Why? Why her? She didn't believe in fairy tales. Not anymore. She had no time for them. But that night, something felt different. For the first time in years, something cracked open inside her. A whisper, a question. What if this could be the beginning? She almost didn't show up the next day. Lena stood in front of her bedroom mirror at 5:48 a.m. The soft light of dawn pushing through a crack in the blinds. She held the card in her hand again, the one Nathaniel Grant had left her. A simple white rectangle with gold embossed letters. So clean and professional, it looked like it belonged in another world. A world she didn't belong to. She had stared at it for hours the night before. Read the handwritten note over and over. You have more potential than you see. Let me show you. It sounded almost unreal, like something out of a movie. But the way he looked at her, that didn't feel fake. That felt unsettlingly real. She tucked the card back into her jacket pocket and caught a glimpse of her reflection. Eyes tired, lips pressed into the same practiced smile she wore at work. Same girl, different day. But something inside her was different now. She couldn't name it, not yet. But it was there, quiet, persistent, like the first tremor before a storm. By the time she arrived at the Velvet Ember, the air inside was already buzzing. Everyone was talking about what happened. Not the spilled glasses or even the humiliating scene with Cray, but what happened after. The part no one could quite explain. He walked her to the kitchen. He sat with her, sat, and Cray's suspension, not just a warning. Lena kept her eyes forward, her steps measured, but their whispers followed her like shadows. At the staff entrance, she found an envelope with her name on it taped to her locker. Another note, meeting, 11 a.m. conference room, B, don't be late. NG. Her hands trembled slightly as she slipped the note into her apron. It wasn't a request, but somehow, it didn't feel like a demand either. It felt, personal. She counted down the minutes through her shift. Every table she served, every tray she carried, every order she double-checked. Her thoughts kept drifting. 11 o'clock. What did he want from her? What would she say? Should she dress differently? Act more confident? What if this was a test? 10:50-9. She walked into the conference room. It was quiet, no dramatic music, no suits waiting behind a long table like in the movies. Just Nathaniel Grant, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, gazing out at the city like it was an old friend. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. Thanks for coming, he said. I didn't think I had a choice. That surprised a smile out of him. You always have a choice, Lena. She looked down at her shoes. I don't feel like it most days. Maybe that's why I wanted to talk to you. He gestured toward a chair. She sat stiffly, back straight, hands clasped in her lap. She couldn't afford to mess this up, whatever this was. I grew up in a neighborhood not so different from yours, he said quietly. Single mother. We lived in a one-bedroom with cracked tiles and a busted heater. I know what it feels like to work for every scrap, to have people treat you like furniture, to wonder if things will ever change. Lena blinked. She hadn't expected that. From the outside, he looked like someone who had always belonged in skyscrapers and private jets, not someone who had known hunger. I don't usually get involved directly with restaurant staff, he admitted, but something about what I saw that night, it reminded me of who I used to be. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. Why me? Because you didn't ask for pity. You didn't scream or argue. You just kept going. That kind of strength, you can't teach it. She swallowed hard. I started a mentorship program," he continued, "for people like us, people who weren't handed a map. We help with business education, emotional coaching, financial planning. We give second chances, real ones. I want you in the next group." Lena's throat tightened. She shook her head slowly. I don't think I'm someone who belongs in boardrooms or business classes. I've never even taken a college course. I barely got through high school." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice gentle but firm. "Do you want this life forever?" "No," she whispered. "Then don't let it define you." The silence that followed felt thick and heavy, but not uncomfortable. It felt like something was waiting to happen. "I don't have money for something like this," she said quietly. "It's covered, completely." Her eyes met his. "Why would you do that for me?" He didn't look away. "Because someone once did it for me." There it was, the offer, simple, life-altering, terrifying. She didn't say yes that day. She didn't say no either. She went back to work with the weight of the choice hanging over her like a storm cloud. Every smile she forced for a customer, every step across the slick tile, every tray she balanced, her mind replayed that conversation again and again. By closing, she felt like she was two different people. The Lena who'd accepted this life as her ceiling, and the Lena who had just been handed a key to a door she never thought existed. The shift ended. She walked home in the cold, thinking about her little brother, asleep in the bedroom they shared, thinking about how tired her mother always looked, thinking about what it would feel like to be the one who changed everything for her family. When she opened the door to their apartment, the smell of broth filled the air. Her mother had managed to cook that night. Her brother was curled up under a blanket, a science book open in his lap. It was just a normal evening, but something about it felt different. She slipped the card from her pocket again, turned it over in her fingers, and whispered to herself, "I don't want to be just a waitress forever." That night, for the first time in years, she dreamed. And when morning came, she woke with a decision. She would go, not because she believed she was ready, but because she couldn't keep living like this, wondering what would have happened if she had said yes. Sometimes, it's not the dream that changes the person, it's the decision to chase it. The rain had stopped by morning, but the streets still shimmered, slick with reflections of a city that never really slept. Lena stepped off the bus, nerves buzzing beneath her skin like static. She held the envelope Nathaniel had given her days ago, fingers curled tightly around the edges as if it might fly away with the wind. Each step toward the tall glass building made her heart pound harder, not because she wasn't sure what she was doing, but because, deep down, for the first time in her life, she was. She had said yes. It hadn't felt real until that moment. She'd walked into the Velvet Ember yesterday, handed in her 2-week notice without so much as a backup plan. Cray had been reinstated after his suspension, but he'd barely looked at her. No snide remarks, no glares, just silence. That silence told her everything. It meant he didn't think she mattered. It meant he expected her to fail. That was fine. Let him expect she was done trying to prove herself to people who didn't care if she stood or fell. Nathaniel's mentorship center was on the 21st floor of a building that overlooked the heart of the city. She'd seen buildings like this before, but only from below, never from within. The elevator ride felt surreal. Each number that lit up was another heartbeat, another thought whispering, "What if I'm not ready? What if they made a mistake? What if I don't belong here?" But when the doors opened, what greeted her wasn't marble floors and cold stairs. It was warmth, laughter, a front desk where a woman smiled without judgment, handed her a welcome folder, and said, "You're right on time, Lena. You're not the only one starting today." She wasn't. That hit her harder than expected. She had spent so long believing she was alone in her struggle, the only one clawing her way out of invisible walls no one else seemed to see. But in the conference room, she met 9 others, men and women from different backgrounds, different stories, all wearing the same quiet look in their eyes, the look of someone who's had to fight for every good thing they've ever had. There was Malik, who used to sleep in his car after losing his job and custody of his son Anna, a single mother who taught herself coding on a borrowed laptop while her baby slept beside her on a couch. Raj, whose family ran a struggling corner store and wanted to learn business so he could keep it alive. They weren't perfect, they weren't polished, but they were ready, and maybe that's all that mattered. The first week was overwhelming. Classes in communication, leadership, personal finance, emotional intelligence terms she had never used in her life. Words like equity and scalability and networking made her head spin, but every time she felt herself slipping into something grounded her. Nathaniel, he wasn't always there, but when he was, he saw her, really saw her. He remembered the details, asked questions that mattered, not about numbers or grades, but about how she felt. "You look distracted," he told her one afternoon after class. It's a lot," she admitted. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm pretending." He nodded slowly. "Everyone does at first. The trick isn't pretending you know everything. It's being brave enough to admit when you don't and still show up the next day." She hadn't expected him to understand that, but he did. In the third week, they visited one of his restaurants not as servers, but as observers. He let them walk through the kitchen, meet the chefs, watch how decisions were made. Lena's hands itched to grab a tray out of habit, but she kept them still. At one point, Nathaniel pulled her aside. "You used to work 12-hour shifts just to keep things together, right?" She nodded, double quotes. "And now, you're here, learning how to lead. How does it feel?" "Scary, exciting, unfamiliar, like walking through a door you didn't know you had the key to." But instead, she just said, "Like I'm breathing for the first time." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Good, don't stop." Lena didn't know it then, but that moment those 3 words would echo in her mind for weeks. Don't stop. Even when the self-doubt creeps in at 2 a.m., even when her brother's insulin costs doubled, and she had to skip meals to cover it, even when one of the instructors told her she wasn't assertive enough to be a leader, even when her landlord left a notice on the door because she was late on rent again, she kept going. She stayed up late studying, watched videos, took notes, asked questions, stayed after class, not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because for the first time in her life, she realized she was building something, and not just for herself. She wanted her mother to see her graduate from something. She wanted her brother to believe in something better than survival. She wanted them to believe it wasn't all for nothing. The night before their midterm presentations, Lena sat alone in the rooftop lounge of the building, staring out at the skyline. Below her, the city glowed like a galaxy. She thought about her first day at the Ember, how she had been invisible, how no one had spoken her name. Now, someone had, not just once, but again and again, and each time it brought her closer to remembering her own voice. She had written her name at the top of her proposal. Lena Carter, founder, Homegrown Hearts Foundation, a non-profit she dreamed of building one day to give youth from neighborhoods like hers access to mentorship, mental health support, and leadership programs. Her idea was raw, unfinished, but real. And tomorrow, she would stand in front of that room and present it to people who would listen, whether they liked it or not. She was no longer just a waitress. She was someone becoming something more, and she wasn't going back, not ever. The room went quiet when her name was called. Lena stepped forward, folder in hand, heart thundering so loudly she was sure they could hear it. Lights from the high windows poured in behind her, making everything feel too bright, too real. She could feel the weight of 9 other dreams watching her, their faces a mirror of the nerves she had been hiding all morning. It was time she stood before the panel of mentors and investors, each of them sharp-eyed and still, waiting. Nathaniel wasn't seated with them. He stood in the back, arms folded, just watching, but his presence filled the space like a safety net she hadn't known she needed. She cleared her throat, the silence stretching like a wire pulled tight. "My name is Lena Carter," she began, voice thinner than she liked, "and I'm not here to pitch a product. I'm here to introduce a promise." That line caught their attention. Heads tilted, brows lifted. She kept going. Was raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford a doctor's visit unless it was an emergency. "I have a little brother who's brilliant, but afraid to dream too big because he knows we can't afford failure. I used to think surviving was the best I could do, but now I know surviving is not living." Someone shifted in their chair. "My proposal is called Homegrown Hearts. It's not a business, it's a bridge. For every teenager who thinks they're stuck in a dead-end job. For every kid who grows up thinking success is a language they'll never speak." She took a slow breath and began detailing the program. Mentorships, scholarships, mental health resources in overlooked neighborhoods, training young leaders, partnerships with local businesses to give real-world experience to students who don't even know how to write a resume yet. She outlined it with trembling hands but steady conviction. She ended with a quote. Her mother used to whisper on her worst days, "If you can carry hope in your pocket, you can survive a storm." And when she finished, she looked up and they were still silent. Not out of boredom, but because she had moved them. Lena walked back to her seat with legs that felt like jelly, but something in her spine stood straighter than ever before. After the final presentation, the panel took a break. They'd be deciding on finalists for funding and extended mentorship. She didn't expect to be picked, honestly. She already felt like she'd won something. She had stood up, spoken her truth, and no one had told her to sit down. That was new. Later that afternoon, the group reassembled in the lounge area, waiting for the results. Everyone was pretending not to be nervous. Conversations buzzed but were half-hearted. Fingers tapped against coffee cups. Eyes darted to doors. Then the program director came in, papers in hand. She smiled. "We've selected 3 candidates for the next level incubation program and seed funding," she said. Lena didn't blink. She didn't even breathe. In no particular order, the director continued. Malik Rowe, Anna Devroe, and Lena Carter. It took her a full 5 seconds to realize her name had just been spoken aloud. The room clapped. Lena didn't move, not until Malik nudged her and whispered, "Girl, stand up." She rose, stunned, every muscle humming with disbelief. She met Nathaniel's gaze across the room. He gave her a single nod, subtle, but full of pride, like he knew, like he had always known. Everything changed after that. The next few weeks became a blur of fast decisions, intense training, media prep, and grant writing. She had meetings with people who wore designer suits and spoke in phrases like growth, metrics, and impact scalability. At first, she barely understood half of what they said, but she learned. She stayed late, asked questions, filled notebooks, rehearsed presentations to her reflection at night, and every time she felt out of her depth, she told herself one thing: you belong in this room. The new version of her didn't apologize for speaking up. She didn't shrink when someone challenged her. She leaned into the discomfort, embraced the mistakes, and used them to sharpen her vision. One afternoon, while reviewing her final grant proposal with her team, Nathaniel stopped by unexpectedly. He pulled her aside. "You're presenting to the city board next week. I wanted to tell you in person." Her eyes widened. "The city board? That's huge. You're ready?" She shook her head, laughing nervously. "I'm still figuring half of this out." "That's exactly why you're the right person. They need to hear from someone real, someone they'll remember." Her voice dropped. "What if I mess it up?" "Then you learn and do it again." "But I don't think you will." She nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the moment. "Thank you for believing in me." "I didn't make you who you are, Lena," he said. "You did. I just made sure you didn't miss your own reflection." The day of the city board presentation arrived, and Lena stood in front of leaders, entrepreneurs, and city officials. She wore a navy blazer over her thrifted blouse, and a quiet confidence that came not from perfection, but from purpose. She began again, not with stats or charts, but with story. "My name is Lena Carter. I used to serve food to people who never looked me in the eye. Now, I want to build something that makes sure kids like me never feel invisible again." By the time she finished, she looked out at a room full of faces, and some of them were wiping away tears. Afterward, a board member approached her. "Miss Carter, your story is your strength. That's your currency. Don't ever trade it for polish." She never forgot that. The city approved an initial grant. Small, but enough to get her started. Enough to turn vision into foundation. 2 months later, the Homegrown Hearts Foundation officially launched, and that night, after everyone had left the launch event, Lena stood alone on the same rooftop where she once stared at the skyline, wondering if she'd ever be more than tired. Now, she felt electric. Not because her dream had come true, but because she finally believed she was worthy of dreaming it in the first place. The photo hung in the hallway, now simple, framed in oak, taken just days after the ribbon was cut on Homegrown Hearts Foundation. In it, Lena stood between her mother and younger brother, each of them holding one side of the sign bearing the foundation's name. Her brother's grin was crooked from shyness. Her mother's eyes were tired but bright, like she had waited a lifetime to see her daughter shine. Lena passed it every morning on her way into the office, but today it stopped her. She stood there longer than usual, fingertips grazing the corner of the glass, remembering what that moment had cost and how close she came to never reaching it. because not all victories stay golden. All days in a dream feel like success. 3 months in, reality hit harder than she expected. They had a rented office space with peeling paint and creaky floors, 2 part-time volunteers, 1 overworked social worker. Lena did most of the work herself, everything from intake paperwork to answering phones to chasing donors for follow-ups. The youth mentorship program had launched, but turnout was low. 1 week, no one showed up at all. Give it time, Nathaniel told her over coffee one morning, watching her rub her eyes after another sleepless night. Foundations grow slow. Don't measure your impact by speed, measure it by the ones who stay. She tried, she really did, but doubt didn't leave her alone, especially late at night, the nights when her phone buzzed with emergency calls, teenagers having panic attacks, young girls seeking shelter, one boy afraid to go home because his stepfather had returned. She couldn't save them all, but she tried. And in trying, she burned. One night, a storm blew through the city, hard and sudden. The power at the center went out mid-session. Flashlights were used, a few candles and somehow, in that half-dark room, something happened. Lena sat with the kids on the floor, 12 of them, ages 13 to 19, and asked them to share the moment they felt invisible for the first time. The stories that spilled out were raw. One boy had been living in a group home since age 7. A girl with a stitched lip told them she hadn't seen her mother in 3 years. Another admitted he'd stopped planning past the age of 20 because he didn't expect to live that long. By the time they were done, the power came back, but no one noticed because the light had already returned in another way. After that night, things began to shift. More teens came. Some brought friends. Some walked in silently and sat in the back for weeks before speaking. But they came, and word began to spread. Lena was invited to speak at a local youth conference. She was terrified, but she went, told her story, didn't polish it, didn't glamorize the pain, just laid it out like a roadmap others might follow through their own darkness. She received a standing ovation. Soon, small grants began coming in. Local restaurants held fundraisers. A retired teacher offered to volunteer. A therapist reached out wanting to donate hours. Then came the call. A producer from a nationally recognized news outlet wanted to interview Lena. They'd heard about the foundation, about the girl who had once served wine in silence and now stood in front of rooms, building bridges for kids no one else had time for. At first, she said no, but Nathaniel called her the next day. You're not just building a program, Lena. You're becoming a voice, and they need to hear it. You need to hear it. So she said yes. The interview aired a week later. It was only 5 minutes long, but in those 5 minutes, Lena told the world what it meant to be overlooked, underestimated, and why the overlooked have the clearest vision of what's broken and what can be made better. The response was overwhelming. Emails flooded in, some from struggling teens, others from struggling teens, others from strangers offering donations. One message stood out. A waitress from another city wrote, "I saw you, and for the first time, I saw myself. Thank you for showing me we don't have to stay small." Lena cried when she read that. Not from pride, from recognition, because she still remembered that girl too, the one who had dropped a tray, broken glasses, at her feet and thought she was finished, but she hadn't been. She'd only just begun. That night, she visited her mother, who was recovering after another hospital treatment. They sat quietly, sipping tea, as Lena shared the news of the interview. The messages, the new donors, the new youth coming in daily. Her mother smiled gently. "You've built something that lives after you leave the room. That's legacy, Lena." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just sat beside her, heart full. Weeks later, Lena stood on stage again, this time at a national education summit. She wasn't there as a case study, she was the keynote speaker. She walked onto that stage in a plain suit, no teleprompter, no memorized lines, just a message. "I was never supposed to be here," she began. "At least, not according to the version of the world I was born into. But I learned something. If the world won't make a place for you, build your own table and invite others to it." The applause was thunderous, but it wasn't the applause that moved her. It was the silence before it, the still breathless. The moment where everyone listened, not because she had power, but because she had truth, and truth has a way of breaking walls, far louder than any noise. The letter arrived on a rainy Thursday, slipped beneath the office door like an afterthought. No return address, no fancy seal, Just a plain white envelope, slightly damp at the edges, with her name written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Lena almost tossed it aside, but something made her stop. She opened it slowly, carefully, as if the paper itself carried a secret it didn't want to reveal too fast. Inside was a single page, lined notebook paper, folded once, creased at the corners. It read, "You probably don't remember me. I came to one of your workshops last fall, sat in the back, never spoke. You were talking about purpose, and I thought you were full of it, but you kept talking, kept showing up, kept believing, and that got to me. I haven't done anything huge yet, but I enrolled in community college last month. First in my family. I'm scared every day, but I remember what you said. Fear doesn't mean stop, it just means you care. Thought you should know. You helped me, without even knowing. My name, J. Lena stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it again, gently, and slipped it into the wooden box on her desk, where she kept the moments that mattered most. The ones you couldn't cash in at a bank, or measure on a chart, but the kind that made the struggle make sense. Because that was it, wasn't it? The power of being seen, of being heard, and even more of using your scars as maps for someone else. In the months that followed, homegrown hearts expanded beyond what Lena had ever imagined. What started in one rented room became a network. Branches opened in 3 nearby cities. New staff came aboard, many of them former mentees, now stepping into leadership roles themselves. There was Malik, who used to doubt every sentence that came out of his mouth. Now he led weekly youth leadership circles and taught poetry on Saturdays. Anna launched a mental health app that translated resources into 5 languages. She used to cry after every presentation. Now she spoke to hundreds without shaking. They weren't success stories, they were success seeds, and they were planting hope everywhere they went. The media came again. Big names, headlines, but Lena never chased them. She was always more focused on the one who sat silently in the back row, the one who didn't speak, but listened, the one who didn't believe yet. Those were the ones she remembered. Late one evening, well past closing time, Lena sat at her desk sorting files when the elevator dinged unexpectedly. She wasn't expecting anyone. Most of the staff had gone home. The halls were quiet, except for the ticking clock and the soft patter of rain on the windows. The footsteps that followed were slow, measured. Then the door creaked. Open. Nathaniel stood there, older now, a little grayer, but his smile hadn't changed. I figured you'd still be working, he said. She smiled back. Old habits. He stepped in, looking around. It's different now. It is, she said softly. Sometimes I walk in and still can't believe it's real. It's more than real. It's permanent. He paused. And you, how are you? It was a simple question, but not many people asked it these days. She leaned back in her chair, tired, fulfilled, constantly challenged, sometimes lonely, but mostly grateful. He nodded. That's honest. They talked for over an hour, about legacy, about balance, about learning to let go of control sometimes so others can grow. And as they talked, Lena realized something. She wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. She had built a community that breathed with her, a place where healing wasn't just for those who came in broken, but also for those who once were, and never had the space to speak. Later that night, after Nathaniel left, Lena walked through the empty rooms, past the wall of photos, the corkboard filled with handwritten goals, the shelves stacked with donated books and college brochures. She stopped in the hallway again, at the photo of her with her family on that first day. Her mother had passed, earlier that year, quietly, peacefully. Proud. Lena had held her hand until the final breath. Now, looking at the picture, she didn't cry. She smiled, because she had done it. She had taken pain and turned it into purpose. She had turned silence into strength. She had taken the smallest thread of a dream and stitched an entire future out of it, not just for herself, but for hundreds of others, and that future was still being woven. The next day, a new intern started, nervous, quiet, unsure. Lena greeted her at the front, shaking her hand warmly. Welcome to Homegrown Hearts, she said. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And in that moment, the circle completed itself, not as an ending, but as the beginning of someone else's impossible story. One she might never see bloom, but one she had already helped plant.